You guys probably know these things. I hear we're going to talk about Muhammad Ali.
Well, I'm going to do just a.
I know, you have to do the intro. I get it. But I had to do that little announce. And make sure you come to my booth today. And make sure you get commissions and empty your wallet. Just dump everything on the table. It'll be good. My wife will be happy.
Save $20 for the local ones.
Yes, except for the $20. No, really, I'm serious about that. You know, you really have to support your local artists. You got guys in this community that are really trying hard to make this work for themselves and the family. They have to, you know, rent those booths and everything. And much as I like the actors, they don't know how to draw. Just saying. I've been trying to teach them, you know. Okay, here's a light box. You just trace this. It's good for you. And they look dumb, look at me like, Neal's coming, he's trying to teach us to draw again. There you go. William Shatner, Bill, come on, art lesson. Oh, Bill Shatner, you used to be in the movies, right? You did The Brothers Karamazov. Did you do anything since then? Just, I have fun with the actors. Don't we? Don't you have fun, right? Great. Go ahead. We're just getting used to one another.
Right. Well, I was going to, you know, if you can indulge me for a few seconds, I was going to say, back in February of 1970, a comic book came out, Greenland and Green Arrow, number 76.
And you grew up here.
I wanted one. I wanted it. This is why I have this. I rock my world. And they're all probably, Neal, the only reason I'm even here today and reading comic books and loving comic books.
You're going to blame me, right? You're going to blame me.
It's because of this gentleman right here. He changed the industry so much, and he's still changing it. And doing recent graphic novels. He did recent Batman, and X-Men, and Deadman, and...
all that is good, but I'm getting Jim Shooter to charge $10 for signing. See, that's important. Because he doesn't. It's Jim Shooter. Shouldn't he be charging for signing? He goes, I say, Jim, you should be charging for signing. He goes, oh, Neal, you know, I'm so grateful to be able to do this. Jim, you're Jim Shooter. What's wrong with you?
This is Neal Adams, you know, Green Arrow, Deadman, Batman, Ra's al Ghul, Talia, Man-Bat, all these creations. His great run on X-Men, his great run on Avengers. I can just keep on going. But we're going to talk today because we are in Louisville. I lived here twice, actually, when I was a young kid. And so I have Louisville roots in me. But we want to talk about the great comic book that you worked on, Superman versus Muhammad Ali.
In 1978.
So, and that was kind of a long fruition on that comic. It was a long gestation.
It wasn't so much a, yes, it was. Yes, it was. Let me tell you something about, you know the cover that has 172 known people on it, not all famous? Anyway, that cover, okay, has a terrible history. Because I decided, the person that was going to do that book was Joe Kubert, who would have been the perfect guy for it because he loves boxing and Joe Kubert was the kind of guy that could walk through a wall, really walk through a wall. He would shake your hand and he would stop shaking your hand when he knew he would crush it. So he was the perfect choice for it. But he did a cover, and the Ali people, including the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, who was then managing Ali's career at that time, they decided that the likenesses weren't close enough, and they needed somebody who's going to do closer likenesses. And we sort of, got together, and we decided that I was going to be the one because my style was more commercial, more realistic, not quite so, down in the dirt, gutsy. And so I thought, I really like Joe's cover. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my paper and I'm going to put it over Joe's, and I'm going to put it on a light box, I'm going to trace off what Joe did, and then type it up in my style. So Joe had done the figures, they were great. He has, by the way, he has that original cover at the Joe Kubert School in his office. So if anybody ever goes to Joe Kubert School, they will see it at his office. So I traced it so that everybody would know that I used his layout. I let everybody know. And instead of, and Joe had kind of gangsters around the ring, tough guys with cigars and stuff, and like a bunch of Italian gangsters. And he sort of based it on a Norman Rockwell painting that you may or may not know of, a boxing match where a guy's leaning down into the audience, he's talking to some girl in the audience, and all these gangsters are around the ring. So he sort of based it on that. Long history, this whole idea. So I decided, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to change the gangsters for famous people. Because if you're going to have an intergalactic fight where you're going to, win the universe, then famous people would come, right? So I decided I was going to put famous people in the audience. Well, I started doing it, and you don't think of it when you're starting, but when you start drawing the audience, the further you get back, the more people you have to do. So the next row is going to have twice as many people as the previous, more and more. Well, I got up to like 172 people. And I was, well, I had put them in all fairness and honesty and good feelings. And the lawyers at DC Comics said, why don't we write to these people and get their permissions to have their faces on the cover? I said, you don't need to have their permissions. They're celebrities. They can, it's a comic book. Yeah, but we should, we should write to them, we should get their permission. I said, but what if they don't want to give their permission? Oh, they'll go along, they'll be fine. No, they won't. They're celebrities. They'll wake up in the morning and they'll have a hernia, and they'll say, no, the hell with you. No, they won't do. Neal, don't worry about it. We'll take care of it. No. So we started, they started writing letters, and people would write notes back, or their agents would say, no, I don't want my actor on it. Really? John Wayne took 3 months to say no. 3 months. Why did he take 3 months to say? I don't know. They just asked him at the wrong morning, or didn't care. So he's still on the cover. He's right in the middle, only he's got a big old mustache on. Just like some other actors. It took a year to get that cover done. A year, getting permission, doing all that stuff.
I read where, I think Mick Jagger didn't want to be on there. So I think we drew Don King over where Mick Jagger was.
I would have done Don King to be a preference over Mick Jagger. I don't know, I guess Mick Jagger's not on there, but I don't know. I started pasting heads on, and then I realized I don't want to do that, so I started drawing mustaches on there. The beards and stuff. So if you look for the guys with the mustaches and the beards, who does that look like? But in spite of all that, we got 172 people on that cover, many of which are dead now, because it was 1978. But that's not the most interesting story, because I passed around another drawing. Okay? That other drawing I did for ESPN magazine. I'm going to tell you the story about that drawing. It's very interesting. We get a call from ESPN magazine. They want me to do a piece of art for them. ESPN magazine is a sports magazine. They've got 3 million subscribers. Okay? Very big. You get sports writers everywhere. Out the wazoo. Okay? So a woman's on the phone. And I'm talking to this woman, and she says, you know that Superman versus Muhammad Ali cover you did in 1978? And we're getting to the year 2000, right? And I said, wait a second, you're a woman, you don't know anything about that. She said, no. My husband's a comic book fan, but I'm a bigger comic book fan than he is. I know about everything. I said, okay, so what about that cover? She says, well, how would you like to do it again? I said, over my dead body. And she said, you know how people can say magical things? Magical phrases, like abracadabra. She said, how about money? It's easy how your head could be turned that way, So we talked until she came up with a number that was like, that's pretty good, okay. I said, what do you want to do? She said, we have voted, all the sports writers have voted for the 100 greatest athletes of the century. So instead of having me cutting out little photos of the 100 greatest athletes and putting them on the cover, I want you to put the front runners in the ring, Ali and Jordan, and put all the rest of them, the other 98, around the ring watching the fight. Really? So I did it. So for the year 2000, the cover for ESPN magazine, to their 3 million subscribers, has the 100 greatest athletes of the century, Ali and Jordan, in the ring fighting all the other athletes in their estimation around the ring, including people from the old days. There's an old baseball player, I'm trying to remember his name, Ty Cobb, noted bigot, really horrible bigot. Okay, and they only had black and white photographs of him. So we took his skin, okay, from his photograph, and we put it in the red, yellow, and blue channels, and we made flesh out of it, made common flesh out of it. Put him in the lower right-hand corner so you could throw darts at him. But anyway, so we did, and we did another thing that was really unique, and probably you won't see it again. You may never see it again, or somebody will do it. They'll go, that was a great idea, I'm going to do this. Every drawing I did of every athlete was from a photograph, and I traced the photograph, because that's my philosophy. If you got a good photograph, trace it. Okay? I don't care what anybody says, they're wrong, I'm right. That's the way it is. Too bad. If you don't think so, you're wrong. So you trace the photograph. Now, what's good about that is now I have tracings of all the athletes on my cover, okay, but I also have the photographs. So let's say I'm going to give it to a colorist, and he's going to color it. Now, he's not going to make the planes of the face just right for that athlete, because they're going to be a little bit off. So why don't we do this? Why don't we take the photograph, take out the eyeballs, the nostrils, and the teeth, and take the flesh and put it right on the drawing. So every one of those drawings, when you get that print, you take a look at it, has not only his likeness, that athlete, his or her likeness, has his actual photograph of his or her flesh on the drawing. It's why they look so much like that. You see it? Some it's very, very, very rare. So it's a graphic technique that hardly anybody's used. I don't think anybody's used it. So that makes that cover. So for the sports fans, that's the choice. For the comic book fans, it's Superman versus Muhammad. The bad thing about the whole experience, it really bummed me out, was in the end, the ESPN magazine writers did their final vote, and they voted Jordan the greatest athlete, not Ali. Now, it really has to do with the word great. I think Jordan is a great athlete. I think Ali is a great humanitarian and did more for people in America than any other athlete in the history of athletics. So I would have voted for number one. I didn't get to vote, but there you go. Made it number two.
So getting back to Muhammad Ali, Superman versus Muhammad Ali, the story, how did that come about? That was...
Well, it came about because we needed a story, and the editor, Julie Schwartz, wanted a story that would combine Ali and Superman, and it seemed like a hard assignment until the question was, is he going to save the Earth? And then suddenly everybody's the same. You know, black, white, or Asian, everybody's the same. You're saving the Earth. You're not just saving these people or those people. So suddenly the problem became not much of a problem. Denny O'Neil and I handed in plots. Julie Schwartz picked my plot. Denny, unfortunately, had gotten sick, and he had to go in the hospital to get taken care of. So Denny started to write the story based on my plot, and I finished writing the story and did all the art with Dick Giordano, and a new young artist who did the backgrounds, Terry Austin, who did probably the best backgrounds I've ever seen in a comic book. I mean, you could go to page 2 and 3 of that book and look at the street scene, And most of that, a lot of that is Dick Giordano-making, but most of that is Terry Austin's background.
So his debut in the industry?
What's that?
Was Terry's debut with that book?
Yeah, it was, really. I mean, I guess he did some other backgrounds for Dick along the way, which got printed incidentally, but it took that book a year to come out, so naturally some of his work would have come out. But essentially, that was his start in the industry. And so you get these incredible Terry Austin backgrounds. I mean, you can just pore over that second and third page, and it's just fantastic. We did a takeoff of it in Harlequin, where we did the Harlequin and Superman. Not quite the same as Ali and Superman, but it's pretty funny.
So you said it took about a year to get the book done?
It took a year to get the book done, but mostly because of that damn cover. You know, we spread out the work of the book over a period of time, but the cover was we get one more message from, some actor who didn't want to have his face on the cover, and so I pasted over, so I put a beard on over, what shall I do? It just was ridiculous. It was the dumbest thing on earth. These people are waiting for the book to come out, and the covers are sitting on. We're finishing up the book, and the cover's still there. And we couldn't do it, because, look, I don't hate lawyers. Okay, I take that back. If there's a lawyer in the room, is there a lawyer in the room? Too bad, because I get to say I hate you, because I don't like lawyers. Lawyers are bad. Lawyers are, what lawyers are like? They're like, I mean, imagine, you've heard all the jokes about lawyers, right? Terrible. It's like a gunslinger in another town, and you got these bad guys in this town, and you hire a gunslinger, and he comes and kills those guys, and then you can't get rid of that guy, because now you're stuck with him. That's a lawyer. No, I'm sorry. That's the way they are. They're trained that way. They have classes where they tell you, go get him, kill him. It's awful. You hear stories. If you get close to lawyers, they will tell you horror stories of, what it's like to be a lawyer. It's like GIs, like Marines. I'm not going to tell that story about what happened in the Philippines, because it was bad. I'm not going to tell you what happened when Disney had to go up against so-and-so, and the boss came in and said, kill him! Kill him! Hold him! Kill him! You're lawyers. You're not supposed to talk like that. Kill him. That's what we do. See, I don't know. I don't know what you expected when you came in here, but I'm sorry. I really am sorry. But, that's the way it is. You have to be a little defensive with lawyers. I have had to deal with lawyers over the years. I've had to deal with lawyers getting artwork back for the artists. I've had to deal with lawyers getting royalties for the artists. And they were the dumbest, worst people on earth. All they cared about was, what are they going to do for their client? Oh, what about what's fair? Ever hear about that? Do you do that? Is there a class where it says fairness in the law? No. Well, there you go. Anyway, sorry.
Oh, no.
I wandered off into my lawyer. Believe me, it's much deeper than that.
Was it always decided to be a tabloid size too? Off the
Yeah, that was the magic. We had run into this tabloid thing, and it was like, it was probably meant to be the first tabloid size, but it took us so long, others came out. But those books are, imagine if a CGC could make boxes big enough for those things to be in.
I'm sure they thought of that.
No, they thought about it, and they've been talking about it for like 3 years now. And they can't get the people who make the plastic to make the boxes big enough, which is, if you think about it, really dumb. I mean, what does it take? You just expand the thing out. It's ridiculous. And if they do it, you're going to see them all over the place, which in a weird way is bad, because then people won't read the book. I don't even understand. You guys do the CGC thing and the CBS, whatever, because then you can't read the book. You got to buy 2 copies, right? A reader copy and one you put in there. And maybe I've had people tell me that I put their kids through college, because they'll buy my old books or they'll buy my old originals, and they'll get them older. The kid will get older, get to college, and suddenly, guess what? You sell an original page for $10,000. I put my kids through college. So I've had 6 people, and there's a thing that happens with people. They say, I've had 100 people doing blah, blah, blah. And you go, nah, I had 2 people. Well, I count people. I've had 6 people come up to my table and it said, you put my kid through college. Now, it probably wasn't 100% that, but he said, I was able to sell art, and I was able to put my kid through college. No tuition, no loans. That's pretty good. I mean, I don't know what that means, but that's happening. Probably from some of those pages that Dick Giordano sold.
Interesting is that I was trying to figure out where the timeline where you were at in terms of you had pretty much stopped and slowed down on the monthly stuff. I think your last Batman monthly was like 1974, that Wolfman.
You have to put into consideration that I was battling, or about moving up to the battle of Terry Siegel and Joe Shuster.
Oh, right.
And there's some things were coming to a head. And
The creative rights still thing going on still at that time?
well, royalties.
Royalties.
I was in the midst of a debate for royalties. And of course there were lawyers there. You want to hear the story about the royalties? I mean, maybe we can just talk about Ali, or we can talk about other.
Yeah, has anybody got a question? You want to take a question yet?
Yeah, you got a question?
You have
You're
yours?
welcome. Yeah. No, you just stood up to stand up.
Okay, I don't get too deep here. But, so, this whole confiscate thing has happened. I'm not
The whole lot.
What's
What's confiscated?
it's the
quagmire.
right now.
Well, what?
But I just want to say that I've noticed that throughout your career that you've done a lot to help people out.
You talk just as slow as Chris Claremont. You gotta watch that. Speed that up.
No, but I'm not as like.
Yeah, go ahead.
But so what you did for the Schusters, for the
Siegel and Schuster, yeah.
Yeah, for the creators of Superman and
Right.
And a bunch of other people.
Yeah, and I noticed that you were kind of like the predecessor to Image and to
Creators' rights.
right,
Yeah.
creators' rights,
Yeah.
and you're also on the forefront of. I mean, a lot of people say now that they don't like politics in comics, but I would say that during your time there's more politics in comics than there are now. Really, and it's true.
Well, personally, I like parlor tricks in comics.
There's as much
Oh,
as-
politics. I'm sorry.
There's as much as things are now. It couldn't even nearly as close as what it was during the Civil Rights Movement.
I think politics. Why don't we just go straight to the
Well,
question?
Yeah, well, I was gonna, and Neal, you came in, I mean, you set the landscape when you came into the industry and what it was like. It was so Neanderthal.
Well, okay, yes and no. I mean, the truth is, I have a book on my table. That all of you guys should get, whether you're Jewish or not. I say that parenthetically, but whether you're Jewish or not, it's about books stories, comic book stories that came out.
It's right here.
Oh,
Here's my own copy.
There you go. We spoke out. It's basically about comic book artists and writers who became aware of the Holocaust after World War II. And basically because we have so much freedom in comic books to do what we want, you know, the editors, if it's a good story, do it. They started doing stories about the Holocaust and the camps before a lot of people were even talking about it, because it was part of the family chat. You know, your uncle would come back and they'd tell you about the concentration camp. So comic book artists and writers were doing stories, especially that very first one in here, which is tremendously dramatic, but there are other stories about Rommel and other things. And it's not political in nature, except that it was spreading an awareness that the Holocaust took place, and maybe we should not forget, because we might get people like Donald Trump, which will never happen. I'm just saying, don't have to worry about that. So we actually, the comic book business, even back then, was political to the extent that we could be, without making, you know, comic book people have a conscience about them. They don't want to tell people what to think, but they want to express stories that explore thinking. So that idea, because it's a form of entertainment. This is not a form of political expression, it's a form of entertainment. But if you you can expose certain things in comics, there's a certain sense of responsibility as a human being to talk about these things. I mean, we handled, I had the first, for example, in Green Lantern Green Arrow, I had the first black superhero that was a college graduate that was a professional. It was an architect. Later on, somebody wrote that he was a Marine, but I think that's a little less important than being an architect. Otherwise, the black superheroes were kind of gangbangers that suddenly get a superpower and then they turn into a good guy superhero, which I think is an ass backwards way of doing it. You know, you don't. That's if I were black, I wouldn't like that at all. I think that's shit. That's a shitty way to handle it. You want somebody who's accomplished something in their life, and then if they become a superhero, well, that's good, because that's the way you're handling the white guys, isn't it? Hello? So, I don't think that's political. I think it's humanitarian. I think it's common sense. And I think, yeah, that's sort of what we do. If it starts to get too political, I think that then you take on a responsibility that you had better be able to defend. And it's very, very hard to defend a political position in comic books. Very hard to defend it. I have not really, you know, people think that I cause trouble and that I cause controversy. The truth of the matter is that I never cause controversy. Nobody ever wrote any nasty letters and complained or marched on the DC or Marvel because of anything that I or Danny O'Neill did. Most of this stuff was self-evident. There's a lot of things that are self-evident. Women don't get paid the same as men. Sorry, it's just not that's a fact, and that ought to change. We should be, you know, we should not have separate but equal schools. When I was a kid, the place that I was working for, which were being contacted and contracted to do a comic book about separate but equal schools. And they were thinking about actually doing it, but they weren't presenting it to me, who I would be the perfect person to be doing such a book, because I was adding to the reputation of this company I was working for. They never let me see the project. And finally I went in and I said, what is this project that seems to be flying around that you guys are not presenting to me? They said, well, you're not going to want to do it. I said, what do you mean I'm not going to want to do it? They said, well, it's about, okay. It's about separate but equal schools. I said, you sons of bitches, excuse me, you're going to do a book about separate but equal schools? Forget about me not doing it. How come you're doing it? What the hell's wrong with you? You're going to do this book? Well, it's a lot of money. Oh, really? Oh, really? It's a lot of money, huh? Now, they ended up not doing it, but I'm not so sure I didn't embarrass them into not doing it. But there's things that are self-evident in society that we should all be aware of. And I think we are. That's why we have a voting system that's all screwed up, you know, that we need to get fixed. So that everybody gets a vote, you know, things like that. There's things that we know. Don't we know that everybody should get one vote? Don't we know that? I think we do, okay? Everybody should get medical coverage. You can get medical coverage in Canada, excuse me, Canada, okay? They got that plastic money, you know, put it in your pocket, pops out. They get medical, we don't get medical. I have a company, okay, I have a small company in New York. People ask me why I come to these conventions and why I sell stuff at my booth. The people at my company, my little small company, cost me $2,000 a week for medical insurance. I didn't say a month, I said a week. $2,000 a week, okay? That's pretty damn expensive. We should be covering that in our country. We should be doing it. Self-evident. There's things that are self-evident. I don't think they're that political. When they start to get political, and they represent minority opinions, and they represent opinions that you really have to kind of look at and go, guys, you know, you're pushing this way too hard. Then you have to be careful. But these are judgment calls that it takes a community to decide on. It can't be decided on by one person. One person can say something, but he has to suffer the brunt of the community saying, you know, that's not us. And that's what we go through. But that's a fair process. That's what ought to be happening. There ought to be discussion. And even in our business, there ought to be discussion. I get involved. When we started doing Superman versus Muhammad Ali, okay, everybody laughed at us. Okay, I had to sit back and get some of the guys at DC Comics, especially in the production room, editors in production room. I had to sit back and in the production room And, you know, it's after hours, we're drinking coffee, and there are people sticking around. Some people go home early, some people stick around, we have bullshit conversations. And they're going, you know, you guys, we're really gonna do this Superman versus Muhammad Ali? And I'd say, and I remember one time I said, everybody in this room is Jewish. And they kind of looked at one another. I said, everybody in this room is Jewish, except me. I'm just a white trash. Everybody in this room is Jewish. And you're asking me if we should do this book? Hello? Excuse me? You want to answer your own question? Everybody in this room. This is a Jewish industry. Comic books are Jewish. Same thing with Hollywood, where they try to deny it, but it's very Jewish, tremendously Jewish. Kirk Douglas is Jewish. Tony Curtis is Jewish. And you guys are questioning whether we should do this? Of course we should do this book. Kidding? No more questions. You know, not bad. I'm sorry.
Did you push back, have Muhammad Ali win the match? Did anything wrong with that?
No, not in the end. Not in the end, because it was the right thing to do. Totally.
And then my last question is, so
I snuck a thing in. Can I just tell you this little thing? I snuck this thing in where the announcer is talking about Ali and Superman in the ring fighting, and Superman's got his Superman costume on, which is one of the things you think of. Why is Superman fighting in a Superman costume? And the announcer says, the reason that Superman is fighting in his costume is that people from all these other planets can't tell the difference between Superman and Ali when they're just in trunks. So he's wearing the costume so that people can see the difference, except for a slight variation in skin tone. Think about it. Anyway.
So some of these decisions that you made, and they were right. They really were like, well, they were the right decisions. Start becoming, fight for greater own rights. You know, challenge your employers to give royalties to these figures. These were decisions that possibly would have like hurt your career.
No.
So where did you?
Where did I get that?
When did you decide to become a risk taker, and when did you decide to just make that decision?
Okay. This is the world I live in. I don't know what the world you live in is. There's good people and there's bad people. Okay? I'm one of the good people. I happen to know a lot of good people. Most people are good. You give people an opportunity to help their neighbor, they will do it. Most people, I find. And maybe, you know, if you get an opportunity and then maybe you have to go a little against the flow, but you know more than they know. Because I did advertising. I've been out in the world. I did things that most of these comic book guys didn't do. So in doing those things, I learned things that they didn't know.
You brought a whole fresh take into the industry.
I think probably because I was out in the world a little bit more, but no more than that. But the decisions are the same decisions you would make. I mean, you're in your minds, you're saying, you're right. That was the right decision. And most people in this room are agreeing with me. Maybe they didn't at that time because they were afraid. Maybe because they were afraid they would lose their job. Okay? And I can see that. But working out of fear is not an excuse. You can't be right over here and then work out of fear over here. You have to decide what's right and what's wrong and then take your shot. I was in a better position to take a shot because I had more tools to offer, whether it was advertising or comic book people, or I could have gone over to Marvel. I mean, I've been to Marvel, but I didn't escape to Marvel from DC Comics. And imagine, if you think about it, just do the calculation. Imagine DC Comics and Warner attacking me, okay, who has a clean record. I have the cleanest record in the comic book business. Because when I was a young guy, I discovered you keep your record clean. You have no little gray spots on your record, or else you can be attacked. So I have no gray spots. I never lied to anybody, and I never lie about anything, okay, ever. Okay, I keep my record clean, so I can't be attacked. But imagine if they did it and went out into the newspapers. Man fighting for the creators of Superman is attacked and fired by his employees. What a mess would that make for DC and Warner's? They're a public company. They're an entertainment company. It would embarrass the crap out of them if they did that. They would never be able to do that. Yeah, they could dump me off a bridge, but that would be about the end of it. And I made sure that that didn't happen. Because I made them seem like the hero. We settled it around Christmas time. I called in all the newspapers and I said, Warner's was saddled, inherited this problem from DC Comics, and they fixed it. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy Hanukkah. Everybody went, hey, Warner's is great. Big smile. So, you know, I'm not stupid. I'm not stupid. Maybe it comes down to being that I'm not stupid. So I'm not going to let something get ahead of me and lose control of it. So I took care of it the way I should take care of it. There, maybe somebody else would have done it stupidly. Like there were guys that tried to form a union at DC Comics about the time that I was there, and they never talked to me. Never talked to me. And then they got fired. And I'm going, why did these guys get fired? Oh, they were trying to form a union. And they didn't talk to me. I would first come to Neal Adams and talk to Neal, because Neal would come and go, nobody's going to get fired here. Because I'd take care of it. Because, you know, you can say things, if you know what to say to the right people at the right time, that bad things don't happen. You're going to fire people because they want to form a union? Really? Really? Shall we send that out to the newspapers? What's going to happen then? Embarrassment, humiliation? No, I think you should give them a raise. And then they get a raise. I'll tell you a couple of things that I've done. This is just sneaky bullshit stuff, okay? We had our first meeting of the Academy of Comic Book Arts at the Illustrators Club. Illustrators Club is great. They got a big red door, right? You go inside, they got art exhibits, and on the second floor, they have a bar and a restaurant. And they have paintings on the walls by Norman Rockwell and all these great artists. And you can just sit there and not eat your lunch and just look at the walls. It's wonderful, okay? And it occurred to Flo Steinberg, who was one of the brighter people there, why don't we have our first meeting at the Illustrator Club? Can't cost that much money, right? It can't cost, because they don't charge that much money. As long as you're buying drinks, they don't care. So you go up and we have our meeting. We're all there, right? And guys had never met one another. The inkers of Jack Kirby's inkers, Joe Sinnott never met Jack Kirby. Never met him. Because Jack lived there and Joe Sinnott lived there, and they never ran into one another. They deliver their stuff to the office and they leave. That was it. So nobody ever met until this first meeting. Suddenly, guys are meeting their inkers and letterers and colorists, and like, oh my God, it's like a community. We all like each other. Everybody's okay. This is cool, right? So I'm going around. I'm trying to figure out who everybody is, and then I'm introducing people to people. I meet Kurt Swan. Kurt Swan, right? Superman artist, the greatest Superman artist of all, okay? The best, okay? I meet Kurt Swan. I think, oh, Kurt Swan. And I, what do you say? You're going to meet somebody whose work you know is wonderful, okay? Shake his hand. Really classically trained artist. Kurt, do you mind if I ask you a question? No, not at all. You're a nice guy. If you don't mind, what do you get paid for penciling a page? He says, oh, well, we don't, that's it. People, we don't talk about that. That's not something to talk about. I said, well, I don't mind talking about it, but I'm just wondered because I get $55 a page. Anyway. I said, so I wondered how much you get paid a page. He says, as of Monday, I'm going to get $55 a page. Apparently, I was getting paid $5 a page more than Kurt Swan. So I went around the whole place and I told everybody my rate. You see a Marvel guy, crazy. These are the things that you can do, but you're not hurting anybody. You're just sharing information. So like, I go to DC Comics, and this is recently, right? And I'm sitting across from the lawyers, and we're working out a contract that I've never had. I've never had a contract with DC or Marvel, which is stupid on their part. They never gave me a contract. Now they have to give me a contract. Now they have to give me a lot of money. Because all these other things have happened to bring them up to the 20th century, and now Neal comes in the door and says, well, now that I've taken care of everybody else, we're going to take care of Neal. Oh, okay, not so good, not so good, right? So I'm talking to the lawyers, I'm talking to the people there. I started on so I said, you know, my daughter's with me. My daughter, understand your kid is going to be tougher than you are. My daughter is tougher than I am, right? So she's there, all blonde hair, looking cute and acting all blonde, you know, but then saying the hard stuff. Like, is my father going to be paid the best rate that DC pays? Well, sure. Sure, of course. Jim Lee's in the meeting. What's Jim Lee going to say? Well, sure, of course. Well, I'm just asking because you guys are saying that, you value him and you want him working and you want to have a continuing contract. So, I mean, he should be paid what the best rate is, right? They said, well, yeah, sure, okay. Well, what is that? And then they scrabble around and they find out what it is. Oh, a little bit more than they were paying me. So I'll tell you what it is. I'll tell you what it is. We'll just talk about pencil pages, right? $800 a page. $800 a page for pencil pages. Top rate. Okay. Don't go spread this around. Just tell everybody. I don't care. It doesn't matter. Better you tell them. So then conversation's going along. Say, well, if Neal's getting the top rate, then you wouldn't mind putting in a favored nation clause. Now you see, you're sitting there and you're not a lawyer. There's not a lawyer in the room. Because if there was a lawyer in the room, his eyes would right now crack open and you'd hear an audible crack from his eyes like this, like that. Favored nations? Really? Now, I'm going to tell you what favored nations is. If you say somebody's going to be paid the best rate of anybody, or equal to the best rate of anybody, then that means that if somebody gets a raise and gets $900 a page, right? Then if you're in a favored nations situation, you get $900 a page. Because you're there admitting or saying in the contract you get the best rate. So if this guy suddenly gets paid $900 a page, you get $900 a page. Now, Jim Lee is there. Jim is confused. What's favored nations mean? Well, favored nations, Jim, means that if somebody's rate goes up, mine goes up with it. In other words, it goes up with whatever the best rate is. Well, that sounds fair. I said, even Jim Lee? They said, well, he's the publisher. I said, I'm just saying, you just said the best rate. Right? No exclusions. Well, yeah. Well, apparently. So that $800 is apparently, if you want to know, that's what Jim Lee gets paid. Because it has to be. Shh. Now, we're having conversations back and forth about characters that I either created or didn't create. Because in the contract, you never do a complete contract. You always screw it up somewhere. So periodically, my daughter's on the phone to the lawyers over at DC Comics, and talking about Neal created this character, that's on the Green Arrow show. Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah, we did it in this one page over here. Oh shit. Okay, we'll add him to that list. Guess he's got to get a little bit more royalty. Oh, by the way, has anything happened with that favored nations thing? What do you mean? Well, I mean, did anybody get any raises lately that Neal should be, equal to? Oh, I'll check into that, Chris, for you. No problem. Yeah, I'll just check into it. Apparently, somebody's getting $1,200 for a pencil page. And so am I! I'm just saying, if you're smart and you do your job, you don't have to be a lawyer, you can just go ahead and, do your job. And in my case, my daughter does my job for me as well as whatever. Yes, go ahead.
So in recent years, you've done Batman trade Batman Odyssey. And you've done
Batman Odyssey, which by the way, I didn't know that you should respond to people who criticize you on the internet. That was because I didn't know that. See, like you got, people started to criticize Batman Odyssey on the internet. They get the first issue and they go, I didn't understand it, I didn't like it, it's not like Neal's old stuff, I hate it. You got the first issue and you didn't understand it? If you buy a Stephen King novel and you get read the first chapter, do you understand the whole story, or do you have to wait until you get halfway through the book before you even get it? But I didn't say that. I didn't write back, right? I didn't like send a letter to this guy and say, hey, cool down, man. We got something to talk about here. Why don't you wait till you get to all 13 chapters and then, write your review. You're kind of on the first chapter. So anyway, I'm not responding to this. And so I called DC Comics and I say, look, I'm not used to this because I've kind of been away for a while. These guys are criticizing me on the internet. Should I be responding to them? They say, forget about it. Don't worry about it. This happens all the time. What a mistake. My God, it was like a barrage, like nobody you haven't read the book. Nobody's read the book and suddenly I'm getting criticized all over the place. So what happens is the books come out. Then the soft cover comes out, the hard cover comes out, then they include it in the omnibus, okay, which immediately sells out. Now you can't buy the book. Now DC Comics has just agreed to reprint it again. Because they, first of all, they weren't behind it, they were behind New 52, remember New 52? So my stuff was coming out when New 52 was coming out, so DC didn't pay any attention, and they gave me bad advice. Somebody should write a letter now to me. They're on the internet. They're going to hear it. Burn their butt.
So what was Richard?
Well,
Yeah.
You've done the Superman story recently and the Dead Man. So can we expect to see Hal and Ollie team up again? What are they doing?
You guys in your house.
What are they doing 40 years later? I want to see it again. I mean, what a time for them to come back, though. It's politically charged.
Oliver, you're in trouble with me. I'm going to bust your butt. No, maybe we could get to it. I think enough people have been doing it. Haven't people been screwing around with Green Lantern an awful lot these days?
But we want to see
Green
Neal
Lantern.
Adams.
Like Green Arrow's got a TV show, for God's sake. I mean,
We want Neal Adams.
Well, I'm not that into it. Not really. I'm doing, you know what I'm doing? I'm doing Dead Man. You haven't read Dead Man, clearly. I'm sorry, I apologize for that, but it's true.
I just read the first issue of that, actually, not that long.
Well, it leaves.
6 issues, baby.
Well, I'll get to it.
6 issues. He yells at people a lot because he's dead.
Left a lot hanging.
I left a lot. See, what I did was, when I did Dead Man, I didn't tell anybody the rest of the story. So they've been doing these Dead Man stories, skeletal Dead Man, like this and other stories. But and I didn't explain to DC doesn't jump forward in time mentally, okay? So they don't see what the future is going to be. I see what the future is going to be. And at that time I was doing Dead Man, I would tell Dick Giordano, who I loved and was my partner, I'd say, look, Dick, Dead Man is a story about a dead man. He's dead, okay? It's like Casper the Dead Baby. He's dead, okay? So this is not a story about Dead Man rescuing a cat in a tree or fixing a romance. He's dead. This is a big deal. Nobody I know has been dead except Dead Man. So it's his story. That's what it's about. So if you do The Adventures of Dead Man, it's not really a comic book because that's not what he's about. It's it's not like all the other superhero comic books. He's unique and he sits over here and it's about Dead Man. So if you read the rest of those 6 issues,
I have a trade, so.
And read it. He's dead. It's about him and what happens after he's dead. So that's what the story is. It's not like any other story. It's not like the hero, Hawkman or whatever the characters are. He's dead. It's just about him. It's his story. And once his story is done, it's done. No more. That's the end of it. Whatever it is. I don't know when that is. So I told Dick about the story, and I said, Dick, whoever picks up Dead Man after what I've done, right, they're just going to do The Adventures of Dead Man. Who cares? You know, when I pick it up, it's going to be the continue. So I'm going to start wherever I ended. This is 35 years ago, Strange Adventures. So in those 6 issues, that's where I pick up, and I move forward. So that's what you get in those 6 issues. And there's a lot of frustration in there because, you know, when he used, back in the day, he used to yell at a lot of people because he was dead. And in this book, he yells at people, like in the last issue, he's just yelling at everybody. He's just yelling at everybody. Because what can he do? And you kind of go, who gives a crap about this guy? He's dead and he's yelling at people. But it's fun. It's fun. People are going, what? Can I help you? No! Get away from me, bitch! He says witch. He says witch. He says witch a lot, but you know what he means. So what happens in the next 6 issues is he's discovered, well, we discovered that he has another brother and sister. And his brother disappeared. And it had something to do with Ra's al Ghul and Nanda Parbat and the League of Assassins. And he has a sister who also disappeared soon after he disappeared. What happened to her? And he has a father and mother still alive. And they have another competing circus. And they are perhaps not the nicest people in the world. Now, maybe they're not nice because of a reason. Maybe his mother was going to die. And his father, to save her life, made a deal with, let's see, Ra's al Ghul.
Don't give too much away. You want to do?
I don't care. So he's going to make a deal with who can he save his wife? How can he save her life? Huh?
Put her in the Lazarus.
Exactly. We know that. He didn't know that. He thinks it's a miracle. We just know it's the Lazarus pit, right? What does he sacrifice? What does Rumpelstiltskin want in place of her life? Firstborn. Now, in this 6 issues, I will tell you, by the end of the 6 issues, Deadman hasn't found yet his brothers. He knows they're alive. And we've got some clues in there, and if you're smart, you'll see it. But I doubt it. Okay? So, Deadman now has to go to find his brother and sister to the greatest detective on earth, who is Batman. That's what the next 6 books are.
And then you're going to do Hal and Ollie, right?
Huh? And then
I would like to, if you could talk a little bit about when you came into the industry and how when most of the people who worked in the industry, it was just a job. They weren't really proud of what they were doing. And,
No.
And you were saying that my understanding of the story is that you were coming in and saying, well, you're talking about comic books are great.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, no, it's not that they weren't proud and that they weren't happy doing what they loved it. They loved it. But it's like loving a dying sister. You know, as much as they love comic books, and they all, anytime the flare would go up, come back, they would come back. Al Williamson is a great example. Al Williamson was probably should have been the inheritor of Flash Gordon. Instead, they gave the comic strip to the daily comic strip to Dan Barry, who was the worst person they could give it to, and the Sunday strip to Macro Boy, who was in a decline of his career and did the worst art he ever did in his life. Nothing like Captain Marvel Jr., which he did, and it was wonderful. But for whatever reason, he hit a decline. And Flash Gordon was terrible. Here was Al Williamson, the perfect inheritor of the mantle of doing Flash Gordon, and they aced him out. These people at King Feature Syndicate, again, a bunch of people who are a bunch of creeping assholes. I had to talk to people. There are people I had to go to the Cartoonist Society and talk to people, and I meet the head of King Feature Syndicate, Sylvan Bike, okay? And all I want to do is I want to scream in his face. You had Al Williamson. You could have carried on Flash Gordon with the greatest Flash Gordon artist of all, and you got these 2 assholes, and kicked out Al Williamson, who then had to go and ghost for other artists So he ghosted for Johnny Prentice, and he ghosted for other artists, and he was the greatest artist for doing this in the world. He was also known by George Lucas, who then put Al Williamson on Star Wars, the comic strip, who said, "Are you people crazy?" So he put him on Star Wars, which was, by the way, if you know anything about it, Star Wars was originally going to be Flash Gordon. And they charged him too much money, or they were too much of a pain in the butt. He said, "Well, I'll do my own Flash Gordon," and he did Star Wars. That's why you see so many similarities between Star Wars and Flash Gordon. Floating cities, you know, the monster in the cage where he has to fight Flash Gordon, fights Starbuck. Anyway, he basically was a fan of Flash Gordon, and he knew Williamson was the guy. So Williamson was thrown out with the garbage. So, but he hung around the edges until one day everything came around. He did, for King Feature Syndicate, he did 5 Flash Gordon comic books, which you should get and you should have in your library. The fact that you don't means that you're crazy. And then he did Star Wars. But at that time, his health started to decline a little bit. He also did Secret Agent X9, which I ghosted for 2 weeks. So you had Al Williamson, you had George Evans, who had to go off and do commercial stuff. You had Alden McWilliams, who just basically disappeared. You had Alex Toth, who went off to California and did Hanna-Barbera cartoons. You had, what's his name, Wally Wood, who did illustrations in Galaxy and Science Fiction and all the science fiction magazines. Then if you wanted to get some Wally Wood stuff, you had to go and buy these science fiction magazines with the spy illustrations by Wally Wood. Then you had Jack Davis, who then did advertising. He was very successful doing advertising. All these guys had to scatter to the winds because the Congress had attacked comic books. And so all these terrible things had to happen, and it started to come back together with Creepy, Eerie, and Vampirella. Okay, one of the artists that came back, I'm trying to think of his name, but he was doing nighttime security at a factory.
Oh, Peter Morrissey, both the Cheltenham artist?
No, no, he's the guy who came back at Warren. He did Creepy, Eerie, and Vampirella. He did science fiction for
Ray Barlow?
No, Ray is new. I can't think of his name. It'll jump into my mind. Anyway, it doesn't matter. These guys were they were thrown to the wind. All the people who loved comic books, who worked for Mad Magazine and worked for rates very similar to DC Comics, but turned out the best comic books in the world. And what was left were not second raters, but certain people who were willing to, bite the bullet and work for DC Comics. They still loved comics. You have to understand, Joe Kubert loved comic books. Joe Kubert could live through the eye of a hurricane and be the only thing standing. And that's what kind of a guy he is. Russ Heath couldn't care less. It's just another day. Then there were other people who worked at DC Comics, and they prayed that comic books would last one more year, but they walked around with long faces, what you're referring to. They walked around with these long faces thinking that the truth is exactly what everybody's saying. A year from now, there's not going to be any comic books. They would all repeat it. They told me. Every time I would meet a guy, I'd say, "Hey, we're not going to be here in a year. That's going to be it. What are you doing? What are you going to be doing? What are you doing here? What's wrong with you?" "I'm doing comic books. This is great. I'm having a great time." "Are you out of your mind? Smiley?"
That's what Joe Simon said to you, right?
Yeah. Well, Joe Simon tried to save my career by not letting me do The Fly. Said, "Kid, forget it. I'm going to do you the biggest favor in the world." I'll tell you my Joe Simon story. Want to hear the Joe Simon story?
Yes.
Okay, because we're going to put this thing out of here.
Yeah, I don't think we actually have a panel after us, but.
Well, I gotta get back.
Yeah, you gotta get.
And you guys have to come and buy stuff, right? Yeah. Anyway, so Joe Simon. So I'm at Archie Comics and I'm trying to get work. Okay, and I'm making samples for The Fly, which is a Jack Kirby, Joe Simon comic book. Jack Kirby and Joe Simon would go to different companies like Harvey, and they would do 4 comic books there, and then they would go to Archie and do comic books there, and they would go to DC, and then Kirby did Challenges of the Unknown. Then Kirby did Sky Masters, the comic strip with the Wood Brothers. who were drunks and assholes, and they ruined the whole thing. So Kirby had to come back to comic books and work with Stan Lee, blah, blah, blah. There was all this history going on in the 50s and the 60s. So you had, Archie was doing The Fly, and then they did a character like Captain America called Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., S-H-I-E-L-D, and some other things that were pretty terrible. I brought my samples up there. Kirby and Simon weren't there. They couldn't look at the samples. And I did some really nice samples. I left my samples there. They said, come back next Wednesday, okay? And one of the guys will be here. Well, I came back next Wednesday, they weren't here, and I had more samples. Now, I noticed my first set of samples, they had cut a panel like this big, one horizontal panel, out of my page. Cut it out with a razor blade. What happened to, no offense, what happened to that panel? Well, we used it in The Fly, and they cut it out and they put it over a Jack Kirby pen.
Oh, wow.
Paid me for a third of a page. Paid me for a third of a page. It was my first money in comics. Third of a page over Jack Kirby. So they finally on my third Wednesday there with new samples, they finally said, well, looks like they're not coming in. Maybe you want to call Joe Simon, talk to him on the phone, see if, find what happened. So they called him on the phone, got him on the phone. Hi, Mr. Simon. He says, kid, I looked at your samples. He says, and they're pretty good. He said, I would use you, except I've ruined your life. I don't want to ruin your life. It's the worst thing in the world. If I hired you and I had you do work, we're going to be out of business in a year. There's not going to be any more comic books in a year. He says, I know you think this is not a favor. I know you think you might not like me for this, but I'm going to say no. You should go out and do something real. I'm sorry. I said, okay, Mr. Simon. And I turned around, and you can see the Archie guys are looking at me, and they can see my face. And so they said, maybe you want to do Archie? I said, yeah, I'll do anything. Well, you have to make samples. I said, I'll make samples. Great, I'll draw Archie. So I went home and I did samples, and I brought in the samples. They said, not quite good enough yet. Okay, we'll go and do more samples. I went home and I realized that they were going to give me this runaround for a while. So I went and got Dan DiCarlo pages, and I photostated them up at the local photostat place, and I put them on a light box, and I traced them line for line, and I brought them in. Oh, you're getting closer. Okay, we'll give you work. Trace Dan DiCarlo. I wasn't above that. Remember, white trash, right? So I'm doing that. Now, time goes by. Time goes by. Now, I'm working at DC Comics. I had done a syndicated strip. I did advertising. I did illustration. I did other stuff. Now, I'm at a low point in my career. I have to go to DC Comics and pick up some work. And then I'll go back to advertising. But I'm at DC Comics, and I'm starting to make changes there. I've become Neal Adams. Neal Adams, who talks about original art. Neal Adams, who makes DC Comics put their original art away instead of destroying it. Neal Adams is talking about royalties. Neal Adams is Neal Adams, boogie, boogie, boogie. They can't fire me because I'm just too much of a boogeyman. So I've become Neal Adams, whoever that is, right? You got it?
Yes.
Not. I want to make sure. Okay. So I'm Neal Adams now. So Joe Orlando comes down the hallway. I'm in my dark room. I've got this projector and I'm tracing photographs. And Joe Orlando comes down and he says, Joe Simon is here. I say, cool, because I never met Joe Simon. And he's like big. He's like Jim Shooter, big, tall, only slim, And he goes down the hall like a sail, like on a ship. When he hits the corner, he has to tilt and go like this. Go around the corner like that. He comes around like this. So I go, wow, Joe Simon, that's really, he says, he wants to see you. I said, cool, great. So I go down the hall, I meet Joe Simon. How are you, Mr. Simon? He said, I want to talk to you, I want to talk to you. And I said, well, we'll go down to the coffee room. And the DC Comics had a coffee room, really nice, had coffee machines, but the coffee was good. So we made coffee, and I said, so what can I do for you? He said, well, I feel I'm being ripped off. I think I own Captain America. I believe I own Captain America, and I'm fighting to get the rights of Captain America and other characters that I've created. So I don't know what to do. He said, I'm trying to fight for it, but the lawyers are so expensive. And I just don't know what to do. I said, well, just, I know what to do. I'll tell you exactly